Welcome, everybody. Starting off with a glitch already, having problems with the LinkedIn feed. So you'll see this recorded. I apologize. It doesn't give me the error until I log in, and I usually don't log in until 3 minutes before, and that's just not enough time to really kind of fix any potential issues. So you'll see the recorded version of this. Sorry, unfortunately it happened, and like it's not enough time to fix that. So as you know, we always start off every section with what are you drinking? What are you drinking? Again, water. It's not water. This time I'm drinking black cherry Zevia, 0 calories, 0 sugar, all the good stuff, none of the bad stuff. Lost another 2.5 pounds on keto this week. That brings me up to a total of 9 over the last 2 weeks. Yes, getting back down to the lose that 20 that I put on, 20, 25 that I put on. Yep. So what are you drinking tonight? Let me see. Shotzi, Diet Dr. Pepper, of course. George is drinking Sprite. And George is drinking, there we go. He's drinking Sprite, and Shotzi, I keep forgetting I can do this, is drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. And pretty cool stuff. And George bought himself a new toy tonight. Look at that. Must be nice. Do you plan on trying to do it as a drone business? Because if you do, you need an FAA license, buddy, for the furtherance of a business. So if you put it on a YouTube channel, you got to have a FAA license. That's just the way that works. So let's also talk about, I forgot. The acronym of the night. The acronym of the night. What is that acronym? If you think you know what that acronym is, make sure that you put the answer in the chat box. What does this acronym mean? And public service announcement. Help control the acronym population. Please have your acronym spayed or neutered. We have enough of them in our industry. We don't need anymore. So anybody, what is it? What does mean? What does AFF mean? Shotzi, you want to take a shot at that? George, take a shot at that. What does it mean? It means above finished floor. Above finished. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Above finished floor. That's all that means. I can just click on it again. There we go. What does that mean? So if you're looking at a set of prints, and if the prints say 8 inches AFF, that means whatever they're talking about, like plywood or whatever, it has to be mounted 8 inches above finished floor. You don't necessarily hear too many people talk about above finished floor in a conversational kind of thing, but you see it on documents a lot. And it just kind of tells the installer what it is that they've got to do. So I got lots of great questions tonight. A couple left over from last week. I apologize for that, but it happened. We ran out of time last week. So this one, the first question of the night came in from LinkedIn through Chris in Dallas. And Chris said, I made the jump from staffing to the install side, mainly driving sales. Obtaining my RCDD is a long-term goal. What is the most appropriate route to get my RCDD? So I actually reached out to him, and I had a phone conversation with him because I wanted to make sure that I gave him a complete answer and understood exactly what he was. So when I talked to him on the phone, I found out that he used to be a headhunter, like, for example, like Aerotech or something like that goes out and finds project managers and estimators and copper and fiber technicians, and then and when you need them, they can send them to your company, and you pay Aerotech and stuff. So he's really good with the sales side. So I asked him a little bit about his company as well. And with his company, why is that thing so bright? Hey, love, can you bump that down for me? It's blowing me out. Thank you. I asked him about his company, and I asked him, does your project managers only project manage, or do they also estimate? There you go. Perfect. Thank you. And he says they do both. They estimate and project manage. And so I like the installation. And he goes, well, I really like sales, but I like installation too. So this kind of all information that I needed to know to kind of formulate the response for him. So the first thing that I want you to know, Chris, and you're probably on LinkedIn wondering, where is this video at? I apologize. I'll put a record, and I might even shoot you a LinkedIn message too to let you know that I had that glitch. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is go to the Bixby website and look up the RCD credentialing. And you want to download the credentialing handbook. And that's going to tell you how to plan your process. Now, to apply for your RCD, it's actually a little different than it was when I took mine. When I took mine, you had to have 5 years of verifiable design experience. 5 years of verifiable design experience. They've changed that. So there are a couple other options. So the first option is you can apply for your RCDD exam after you only have 2 years of experience if you already have a Big C technician, a Big C outside plant, a Big C DC, or the Big C RTPM certification. So if you have one of those 4 certifications, you can go ahead and apply for your RCD test within 2 years. The other option they give you is if you have 2 years of higher education in the ICT, then you can also apply for your RCDD exam at 2 years as well. I'm not really sure what that means. I would assume maybe some type of electronics class, or maybe some type of a computer class. Maybe I'm not sure, but you'd have to ask Bixby that. So they give you options, and I got the idea from your message that you said your RCD was your long-term goal. So that means to me that you obviously are thinking ahead, and you're kind of person you're like my wife. You're a planner. She plans stuff out. We have to move our animals on the property for some reasons. And she's already drawn up the plans on where to move them to. And I'm like, I'm not doing this for a while because that's 700 feet of fencing I got to put up. So you're a planner, and I like that. So here's the first thing. So you have at least 2 years before you can even apply, because coming out of headhunting, I don't think they're going to count that. I could be wrong, but I don't think they will. So you have at least 2 years. So the first thing you want to do is immersion. Just like so for example, when I get a new ham radio, I want to get my ham radio's license. And my birthday's coming up here real soon. I'm talking to my wife, and I'm going to get my ham radio. I'm going to get my ham radio license and immersion. I have been watching every video and reading everything I can on ham radio and ham radio licensing. That's what you got to do. What does it mean in the ICT industry? Subscribe and read Cable Installation Maintenance Magazine. I interviewed Paul McLaughlin last night, and I pushed out the show. Great guy. I've been using that magazine for 2 decades. 2 decades. There actually used to be another one, Cable Business Magazine. So I used to read both of them. But Cable Business didn't make it, so the one left is Cable Installation Maintenance. And I give them credit for the majority of the stuff that I learned in our industry, because they do a really good job of doing that. They also, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to attend every webinar that you can get a hold of. Every webinar. Now, where can you find these? Lots of different sources. Manufacturers. For example, my day job, we do webinars. They're free. Sign up. You can watch the content. They give you a certificate. Make sure that you save that certificate. So, for example, Brother Solutions, Todd, my buddy Todd Morse over there, he's got a 2-hour ANSI class, I think, on labeling. Watch that. Like I mentioned, we have many. Our competitors have many. You know who else has great webcasts? Cable Installation and Maintenance Magazine. They do, I think, like 2 a month. And they record them, and you can always go back and watch them and get them on. So if you can't attend the one because you're doing a walkthrough on a job site somewhere, you can watch the recorded version. So immerse yourself in that. And then another one you can look at is Bright Talk, brighttalk.com. It's a free service. You can sign into it. There are some paid portions to it. A lot of people do webinars on there, and that's actually more broad. That's not specific just to ICT, although they do have ICT functions to it, or ICT webinars on there, but there's some other ones on there. They might even have ones on getting your Part 107 license, George. Yeah, just saying. You can go on there and watch it. And then the other thing that you want to do is look for content creators in this industry. Now, I've already mentioned one, Todd Morris from Brother Systems. Every other Thursday, he does a BS with Todd. And he talks about labeling and labeling issues. Another one is Low Voltage Nation. My good friend Blake over there, Blake Ermos. He's got a podcast, and he's got a lot of great content. And there's also a Slack channel that you can join up, and you can actually be part of that and also learn that way. And then there's also a podcast by STI called The Burn Beyond Fire Stop. So there's, they do podcasts about fire stopping. There's lots of great content. And the beautiful thing, and don't forget, let's talk cabling, the most important one, right? The beautiful thing about content is you can consume it anywhere. You can be listening to podcasts when while you're driving to work. You could be listening to podcasts while you're on an airplane flying to a job site. You can consume the content. You don't necessarily have to be in front of a book in order to do that. So make sure you do that. Then the next piece of advice I have for you, find a mentor. Find a mentor. Now, the best mentor is going to be someone you work with. So if you mentioned when I talked to you on the phone that you had several RCDDs there already who are doing project management and stuff like that. See if one of those will mentor you. And look up stuff on mentoring on how to do that process. You understand that you're going to be doing most of the work, and that they're going to give you guides and help you along and tell them what your goals are. And you meet like once a month or so and you talk about it. If for some reason that nobody at your work wants to mentor you because they're busy, look up Bixie. Bixie has a mentoring program. Ashley Wills, she's the one heading that. I am a mentor on that. I've already got a mentee, and I've got other mentees I'm doing outside of it. My plate's full. Otherwise, I'd offer to mentor you, but my plate's full as far as mentoring. And then once you got all this stuff going on, you're going to seem super busy. And at first, when you're reading all this stuff, it's going to confuse you. You're going to be reading this like, what's this? What's that? Especially the acronyms, right? That's why I do the acronym challenge every day at 8 o'clock. It's going to confuse you. But at some point, if you keep immersion, if you keep reading through it, it will start to make sense sooner or later. It will, trust me, it will absolutely make sense. Now, then at this point, you're thinking about your tests. About a year out, you need to start thinking about getting that application process going. And then about 6 months out from when you actually take your test, you want to go ahead and purchase and read the TDMM, the Telecom Distribution Methods Manual. If you do it on the 14th edition, that's roughly about, correct me if I'm wrong, Shotzi, 1,400 pages, I think. No, 2,200 pages. 2,200 pages, I think. Yeah. So I got a study group. We're going through it. We're doing 70 pages a week. It's going to take time to read through that amount of content and absorb that content as you're going through it. Jot down on index cards, 3x5 index cards and stuff like that, right? So it's 2,197. I was off by 3. I said 2,200. So very good. It was very close to that. And then there's also some free test programs that you can take to do your practice exam to get your brain wired up for taking exams, because that was my problem. I took the test and I'd been out of high school for so long that I'd really gotten out of test taking, and I really just wasn't good at it. So make sure you read and understand that. And then you can also start your own study group, right? That's kind of what I did. I have a Zoom account, and I just put the feelers out there and said, look, I'm doing a Zoom account. I'm doing a TDM study group, and boom, 22 people signed up for that. And the beautiful thing about having a study group is other people are going through the process with you, but they're also an accountability group, right, Shotzi? Did you do your reading? And that's one of the things. I'm more diligent about doing my reading if I know I got to get in front of a bunch of people and say, oh, guys, I didn't do my reading. That motivates me to do my reading. So make sure that you do that. And then that covers a lot of the stuff, but there's still some other areas that you want to focus in on. You want to get access to and read the codes and standards. The codes and standards. Hopefully your company has an office of the code book. Hopefully your office has a copy of the standards. If they don't have a copy of the code book, I do have a workaround for you. If you go to nfpa.org, you can go on a free access, and you can go in, create an account, and then you can have access to the electrical codes and National Electrical Safety Code and all the other codes that the NFPA produces. You don't have to buy Equals 800, 805, 725, 770, 300, Article 100. Make sure you read those. And you have to read them several times because they're not really written for the lay person, for the layman's term. So there you go. There's your answer, Chris. And you know my phone number now, obviously. Feel free to call me if you have any other questions. Let's move on to question number 2. Let's see. Again, remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. I'm keeping an eye on the chat box at the same time. So the next question is from a repeat person, 13 Serpents. 13 Serpents. He sent this message to me via YouTube. And he says, Judd, I'm working on a multi-family dwelling that's over 80 units across 3 floors. It was designed with 2 IDFs per floor sharing with the electric room. The customer wants to redesign this with microduct from each unit going down to the first floor MDF. I politely advised against it, saying, no, you should really have 1 IDF per floor, serving that floor. What are your thoughts? First off, residential cabling is not one of my strong points, although I started off in this industry in residential, but it was actually for a cable TV type company. But I did go to the TDMM and I read to see what that actually says. Now, in the TDMM, in case you look it up, it's on pages 20-11 or PDF page 1546. And the reason, I just thought of this, the reason why they want to give up those IDFs is because they can charge more rent based on how much usable square footage they have. They can have a higher selling price for those units if they've got more usable square footage. So the more square footage, the more money they can make, right? So that's probably why they want to get rid of them, because they think, hey, if we get, these clauses really aren't that important. We know they are, but they're probably thinking they're not that important. So the key there to getting to do it, what you want to do is explain to him how his decision, or explain to that person how their decision is going to cost them more money. I'll talk more about that in 1 second. So if you want to get more detailed information, you want to go to the ANSI 570 standard. That's the residential standard. As I mentioned, I don't have access to the 570 standard because to purchase the standards, they're like $1,300, $1,500 to buy a set. Hey baby, yeah. Can I spend $1,500 on some standards? No. She said no. So, oh well. I guess that's no 570 standards for Chuck. But my birthday's coming up, baby. She just laughed. I think that still means no. Yeah. So think about this. With the pandemic and with COVID, a lot more people are working from home, right? And that's going to require more bandwidth for this environment. So that's going to put a huge stress on the network that they have there. So I don't think this person is really thinking about those impacts. I really don't. Now, when I actually went to the residential section of the TDM, it basically calls for a CTR. That's a common telephone room. Another acronym for you. Common telephone room. If you hear some noise in the background, we're canning chicken broth. We harvested our chickens last weekend, so we're canning the broth. So you might hear the canner in the background. And it basically calls for a common telecom room on each floor. But it's a should, not a shall. Remember those terms, should and shall. Shall's a requirement, should's a recommendation. So keep that in mind. Now, if you're showing that to somebody, if you're taking that page and you're showing it to somebody outside of the industry, they may not necessarily understand the impact of the word should. So you can use that to your benefit. You can say, look, it says here, got to have one for every floor. But also on the back half of that sentence, it says, you could also do a CTR, a common telephone room, on every third floor. The theory behind that is if you put one on the second floor, it can serve the second floor, the first floor, and the third floor. So it can serve the floor that it's on, the floor above, and the floor below. So you can do either one of those per the TDMM. Now, based on the way that you described this, you said 80 units across 2 floors. No. 80 units across 3 floors. This sounds to me like it's an apartment building, right? Now, think about this. My recommendation would be different if it was if one person was across multiple floors. but this sounds like to me like it's an apartment building. I would highly recommend a minimum one CTR, one CTR per floor, right? Because if you only have the way that they're doing all one microducts from all of them down to the first floor, them runs going from the third floor down to the first floor, they might be exceeding their 295, and that's going to affect their performance. You affect the performance, you affect the dollar value, how much you can charge for rent, how much you can charge to for the sale price. That all is going to affect that. All right, so I would do at least one. Right. Remember this, and when you explain this to the customer, the standards, and I'm borrowing this from my fellow instructor Kevin, the standards creates a box. If you stay within that box, we can guarantee performance. And remember, I just talked about COVID and people doing Zoom calls and distance meetings, and there's a lot more bandwidth being put on the network. So we need that ability. So that box creates the need. And if you stay within that box, we can guarantee your Zoom call is not going to get the max headroom effect, I like to call it, right? So, explain to the customer, look, by doing this, your decision is going to be costing you money because you're not going to be, people are going to start complaining because their network's not working right. You're not going to be able to charge as much for the rent. You're not going to be able to sell those units for a higher dollar because they got a premium internet service. That's how you do that. You explain to them how their decision is going to cost them more money. That's how you always educate a customer, because there's a sales adage: the customer's never wrong. The customer needs to be educated. All right, so customers can be wrong, and again, make sure that performance is there and they can understand that. So the third question for tonight comes from, and I hope I pronounced this person's name correctly, comes from YouTube, and the person's name is Karthikeyan. I hope I said that correctly. If I didn't, please let me know, Karthikeyan. If I did, I apologize. So his question was, why a wireless access point should not be connected to the MUTOA? Why can't it be just considered work area equipment? Okay, so the MUTOA, just as a refresher, is that faceplate or that patch panel mounted on permanent building structure right by a modular furniture cluster, right? The MUTOA is usually mounted down low. It's usually mounted down low so you can't see it, right? Think about wireless access points. Wireless access points need height. They need to be mounted high. That's why you see them in ceilings, because when they're mounted up high, there's less obstructions. You get a clear visual path, so there's more people that can get access to it. So if you mount it down into that MUTOA, it's going to be mounted down low. There's going to be a lot of obstruction for those radio waves. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Chuck, what if we plug it into the MUTOA, but then we get a 15-foot patch cord and run the patch cord up and attach it to the ceiling? Well, now you got a patch cord running up the outside of the wall. That doesn't make any sense, right? It should have its own dedicated run back to the TRI. The TDM even tells us that. I would not even run a wireless access point out of a consolidation point, because a consolidation point is an interconnection. It is a splice, right? And now think about this. Wireless access point shares bandwidth. It shares bandwidth. It's not just one person's connection. That's 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And if they're all streaming and you're going through a connection, remember, your signal degrades as it goes through a connection, a splice or connection, anything like that. So I wouldn't even do it through a wireless access point. I would dedicated run. Matter of fact, most wireless access points require you to run 2 cables to them. And they're usually Cat 6A recommended generally. So that's why I would not do it that way. Karthikeyan, I hope I said your name correctly. I hope that answered your question. Again, remember, if you have a question, put it in the chat box. I do have 2 more questions to go through, and I might have some time for extra tonight. Maybe not. We're at 6:25 already. So the next question, this one comes from Greg, and it was on LinkedIn. And his question is, why does a punch tool have a flat side? Great question, Pat. Or I'm sorry, Greg. So what he's talking about there is, here's a blade for a punch tool. Okay. Now, if you notice, it's going to be kind of hard to really show you, but on the one side, it's got a little cutting blade on. I'm trying to point to it there, see if you can see a little cutting blade. All right. So when you die flat. This was used for bridging circuits. So if you had an analog phone line and you wanted to show up a different, 3 or 4 different phones, you would flip your punch tool so the flat side's out, and then you would punch it down, and then that way you'd have one single cross connect going through 4 or 5 different locations on your termination block. Otherwise, if you use this side, you'd have to run 5 or 6 different cross connects. So that's why you have that. Okay, and then question number 5. And this is my last question. So again, if you have a question, put it in the comment box. You have about a minute and a half before I do this, before I shut down. I'm not sure I shut down, before I finish this question. So this question came from Paul in an email, and it says, Chuck, why do I have to use antioxidant on bus bars? Okay, so the TDMM tells us, and this is verbatim from the TDMM, it says, it is critical that anti-corrosion and oxidation compound shall be applied to the lug and the lug surface of the bus bar, whether it's the primary or the secondary bonding bus bar. So the TDM is telling you need to do it. That's one reason right there that should be good enough for you. When you put a connection to a bus bar, our connectors are a different type of metal. They're not copper. And when you put 2 pieces of metal together, 2 dissimilar metals, you get what's called galvanic corrosion. So that antioxidant reduces that. Now, the reason this is important is because this is a life safety issue. You want that bonding bus bar, that bonding conductor, to have a good, clean, great connection, because if it's not, somebody can get hurt. Somebody could actually die because a connection's loose or it got corroded. So yes, you absolutely want to use antioxidant when you're mounting a ground lug to a bus bar. Absolutely. And that's why generally we don't allow electricians to put in bus bars for us, because they like to put in them little strips with the screws. Yeah, no, we need a bus bar. I was just thinking, I'm going to reach out to CPI, and I'm going to see if I can get one of their engineers to come on and do the podcast and talk about bus bars. That's a great content. Yeah. Hey, if you think of content that you want, let me know in the chat box. So we're at 6:29. 1 minute. I'll take a sip of my drink. Anybody have any other questions before we shut down for the night? Any other questions? Going once. Going twice. Okay. See you guys next Thursday night. Is next Thursday vacation week, baby? No. See you next Thursday. The week after is vacation. So there won't be one on that weekend. I'll be home, just not doing work. So take care, everybody, and